What is Hyperborea? A difficult question to answer. Hyperborea is the last golden age. Hyperborea is the absence of maleficent psychic influences. Hyperborea is the home of all righteous folk. Hyperborea is also an absurd mishmash of ancient Greek mythology, astronomy, and mathematics served up by a French Freemason, possibly citing the ever-prescient works of opium, then finally brought together by esoteric theosophist and Russo-American gigastasy Helena Blavatsky, to later be popularized by Julius Evola in his most coherent work and the reason why women won't talk to me. The theory goes that a mysterious continent existed on the North Pole. This, the birthplace of all Aryans, was both highly advanced and civilized, where men were righteous and women chaste, where white monster flowed from abundant Arctic springs before an alteration in the Earth's axial tilt caused a mysterious cataclysm, which forced the Hyperboreans south into continental Europe, creating all of the superior traits of Indo-European civilization, such as pensioners, pederasty, and child VTuber models. But according to the scriptures, the culture that the Aryans sowed across all continents was perverted by a tribe of most perfidious nature. What is left now in modernity is a gaping hole in the heart of Western society, the sole reason for the male loneliness crises and the pervasive, incessant need to fill this yearning with something. A phantom pain, for a phantom limb cured only by phantom medicine. Something so long forgotten that you can no longer recall what you even lost. Heidegger called it the forgetting of being, a man robbed of something he never knew he had. Strauss identified the unjust nature of the value-neutral society, but civilizationally fell short in identifying the cure. Evola, a perennialist who wrote of Hyperborea as the spiritual cradle of humanity, yearned for this primordial truth, but ultimately rejected the conscious revival of defunct traditions, seeing as any modern attempt to recreate them would be superficial, anachronistic, and devoid of true spiritual power. Well, bucko, that's where you are wrong, and allow me to prove it with the incontrovertible empirical data point that is Hearts of Iron 4. If you haven't clicked off this video yet, you might have been sitting there thinking to yourself, what does such a salient and reasonable theory have to do with my favorite infallible history and politics simulator? Also, why does my lead paint taste so thin today? If you are a lonely man experiencing regular bouts of unemployment and having zero hoes, then this video is for you. Allow me a show and tell of the unhinged yet strangely captivating potential nation supreme that is Hyperborea, the warlord state it springs from, its ideology, and the capital T tradition it resurrects. And as with all things unhinged in HOI4, the answer is of course mods. Which mod? This mod, TNO. Real quick about TNO. TNO is an alt history Cold War scenario overhaul for HOI4, where the Third Reich wins the Second World War. The Soviet Union was defeated, split into three, with the westernmost Russia attempting yet another war against Germany, which failed, while the other two Russias fought each other and imploded from internal issues, leaving the entirety of Russia looking like something out of Gunther Fehlinger's most jizz-soaked wet dream, with despotic warlords ruling tiny territories of the former superpower. And it is in this mod where most of these micronations could be the one to reunite Mother Russia through diplomacy or through force. It is among these ruins enlightened Hyperborea, the primordial tradition, true Aryans will rise from a bombed-out hellhole in the Ural Mountains, the Aryan Brotherhood. Who are they? Or rather, why are they? Why is this clearly non-Aryan folk referring to themselves as Aryan? Do they think they're Mexicans? No. In TNO lore, Russia has, as previously mentioned, lost 3 consecutive wars to the German Reich, which has understandably left some national and ethnic scars on the collective psyche of the Slav. Empirically speaking, the self-proclaimed Übermensch mensch do seem to be quite über all the other mensch, but fortunately, one man rejected these notions of Völkisch subjugation. Alexei Alexandrovich Dobrovolsky, aka Guthrum Wagner, the fictive leader of a most sophisticated band of gentlemen and scholars, and a real-life, very sane individual who in TNO has an idea, a theory. The framework of the master race propagated by Germans is true. It was clearly demonstrated in the West Russia War, but the gestalt was mistaken, incorrect. It was not only the Germanic folk that were the true Aryan, for Aryanism was in fact not a physical trait, but a psychological one, the will to triumph. Thus, the Führer of Perun was born. The Slavs were unter, don't get it twisted, and not only that, were oppressing the true Eastern Übermensch with their notions of democracy, socialism, and I guess comparatively Wagner isn't that bad at all. This is the beginning of the Brotherhood storyline, the caterpillar and chrysalis that will form righteous Hyperborea in a scant few years. But how are the two connected? Answer: Neo-Paganism. Specifically, for the Brotherhood, a mixture of Germanic and Nordic idolatry. You might have noticed something slightly off looking at the names of people, cities, and divisions. Like a tech supporter with a very Caucasian name, but a slightly Canadian accent instead. Stepan becomes Valtin, Alexei Wagner, and Gorm is suddenly a perfectly cromulent name for a war hero in Russia. This is of course because the Russian language is a slave language, unbefit for true Aryans. German is what we must speak, but unfortunately, our education system is slightly Alabama. So Deutsch it becomes instead. A weird amalgamation of German and Russian. Geheimstaatspolizei, Führer, Infanteriedivision, etc., etc. Beyond this, the Brotherhood is heavily involved with Viking mythology, Asetro, of which the folklore deifies strength in combat, raiding, and idolization of warrior prowess. The pagan aspect is the connection to Hyperborea later on, but for now, we must ask ourselves the question: how does a Neo-Pagan government formed on the ideas of material violence being capable of achieving spiritual Aryanism run? Poorly. Being a ragtag band of hyper-violent bandits subsiding on slave labor, cross-border raids, and licking the morning dew off of rocks hasn't exactly done wonders for the industrial capacity of these enlightened folk. Poverty levels are straight up African Civil War status. Healthcare is either a band-aid if you're unlucky, or a 7.62 to the back of your suspiciously Aryan skull if you are lucky. But at least child labor is legal, as it should be. What's even worse, the Luftwaffe conducts regular terror bombings in West Russia, severely limiting what can be built and maintained, and oh my god, look at those debuffs. No worries, the Luftwaffe are our Aryan brothers in the sky after all. Sure, they indiscriminately bomb us as severely as any other Slavic warlord state, but it is only because they don't know who we are yet, which is why we must immediately begin the work of building a nation worthy of our occasionally genocidal estranged Germanic brothers. That means creating, like they have, a clear delineation between master race and slave race. For Germans, believing in physical genetic Aryanism, it is easy. Just look at anthropometric measurements of an individual's skull, bone structure, canthal tilt, bideltoid, gonial angles, PSL scale, official Chad ranking. But for Wagner, Aryanism is psychological. So how do you psychologically separate the master wheat from the slave chaff? Well, we aren't neo-pagans for nothing. Ritualistic human sacrifices for one. For two, imagine the scene from The Dark Knight, where the Joker recruits new members by semi-gladiatorial tryouts, but now on a systemic scale. It is not necessarily about who is strongest or fastest or smartest, but rather who is the most willing to murder former friends. Basing your society on this can only lead to good things, I believe. And It is in this initiation test that leads to Valery Yemelyanov, aka Siegfried Schultz. As Russia goes through its various stages of regional reunification, the Aryan Brotherhood, of course, proves to be superior. For one, they possess the will to triumph, the most pure, the most committed, the strongest super soldiers the master race has ever produced. For two, I played on the easiest difficulty. But even in a monadic supernation, political struggles happen. One man among us was unafraid of posing the most galaxy brain question of all. What if the Zionists played us? Not once, not twice, but 3 times. What if the Judeo-Masonic conspiracy was not the control of international banking, Bolshevism, and digging tunnels in suburban New York? What if Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich, and indeed every single German was an agent of the Juden? What if the true Aryan was not the Germanic, the Nordic, the friends we made along the way with ritualistic human sacrifices, but the Slav? Not psychologically, but physically, genetically, hereditarily. Only one master race, and that race is the Russian. And the Zionist cabal orchestrated from the shadows the Third Reich to extinguish any chance of the Boreal Ruse re-emerging. I know what you're thinking. Genius. Don't ask about the Shoah. You know how shadow governments work. That's just some false flag nonsense. Throw a few to the wolves and lose the battle while you win the war.
They expect one of us in the gas chamber, brother.
Thus begins the doctrine split in the Brotherhood. Wagner's doctrine of Aryanism being only achievable through vigorous trials that would filter all but the few, or Siegfried's esoteric, pagan, yet expanded Slavo-Aryanistic framework, and indeed the primordial truth. Siegfried of course wins, because, you know, the title of this video, and also might makes right, so his theory is proven true and based. Besides, Siegfried's faction actually makes some very coherent ideological talking points in between the continued ritualistic sacrifices. In Wagner's Brotherhood system, the Aryans separated from the Slavs would be and remain a tiny minority to fulfill his stringent demands of what makes a true Germanic Übermensch. Everyone else, they would be slaves, forever toiling in the most abject material conditions, while Siegfried would allow the slaves to work themselves to maybe not freedom, but serfdom, as well as expand the ranks of the master race considerably. We don't even have to look at real life to see that Wagner's system is bound to fail, as mighty Germany itself suffers a slave rebellion in TNO. How exactly would a similar system work for a much weaker and poorer nation with an even bigger slaves to master ratio? No. Hyperborea, the true north, is the correct path for all Russians. Siegfried is no longer Valery, nor Siegfried, but High Priest Velimir. And while the Brotherhood would have seceded all civilizational achievements to the Germanics, Russians are now free, well, mostly free, to reclaim their rightful place as the master race. To put it in simple terms, in the Brotherhood's ideology, Russians are the willing and eager cuckolds, and the Germanics the bull. Whereas in the Hyperborean framework, the Germanics are deceitful Zionists, as are the Nordics, the Americans, the Greeks, the Easterners. Basically, anyone who isn't your specific ethnicity is probably a perfidious disciple of Moses, and I think that is a very healthy worldview. Hyperborea is one of one, even in TNO. No one shares their worldview, no one shares their goals, no one shares their gods nor their traditions. In Hyperborea, there are no financier cabal, no Bolshevik laborers, no YouTubers calling their videos essays and then just summarizing the plot of a media piece at you for 3 hours. Here, each and every factory has its own priest ensuring that your 6N2P vacuum tube complies with the principles of our ancestral faith. Oh, and that faith is mandatory, by the way. Healthcare, modern medicine was invented by Talmudic agents. What you want is blood rituals and prayers. Little Timmy having pancreatic issues? Have you considered the use of goat's blood twice daily? Bedridden still? Clearly, you aren't praying hard enough. You want penicillin? You might as well construct the third temple right in your own backyard. Yahwehist agitator. Hyperborea has excellent flavor events such as former folk holidays like Maslenitsa, where the arrival of spring was celebrated with buckwheat pancakes, instead becoming a day for burning Jewish effigies, or the priest hiding his worship of Christ from his pagan overlords like the first Christians of Rome, or Siegfried personally stabbing Wagner to claim leadership of the nation. The priest one is probably my favorite, so allow me to read it aloud. The cross had been pulled down from the roof, thrown into a great pyre of many other false icons. The humble wooden statue of Christ himself had been hacked to pieces and scattered into the flames. In their place rose monuments to the gods of old. In the walls were etched swastikas, and at the altar stood a monument to Perun, the Lord of Thunder himself. The Zionist den of lies was no more. This was now a house for the Aryan. Or so they had told Leonid, an attendant to this small church. Ever since he was a child, he had come to this church every Sunday in the darkest of times and the brightest of days. When Russia consumed itself, he prayed to Christ for his most distant of kin to be safe. When the Aryans thundered into his town and slaughtered all those who refused to kneel, he prayed for God to guide these martyrs to heaven. Then they told Leonid that if he did not bend to the will of Perun, his blood would stain the very church he spent so many years in. In a moment of weakness, he agreed. The grief of betrayal ate at him. He felt he had turned his back to the true savior of mankind. Judas possessed his soul to serve the devil and his minions. But even then, with that pain born deep in his heart, the light of the true God shined bright. The God of Moses, the God of the Jews. Leonid was now like the first Christians in Rome, forced to conceal their beliefs, but still faithful deep down. And even as the pagans assembled at his church's altar for another blood sacrifice of his neighbors, even as the knife dug into their chest as they screamed, he prayed, "Lord of lightning, take this offering as our gift to you," the priest began, and the others repeated. But Leonid prayed to another, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on them, the sinners. Give unto them what they could not give to others." And into the night, over a humble house of worship, a thunderstorm approached. The Sunday of forgiveness has indeed become the Sunday of hatred. I am not personally religious, unless you count Wahhabism, but I found that particular event to be the best writing of the AB Hyperborea path. Unless you count the generic Tokyo Stock Exchange message, of course, and there are other equally Kino lore events, but about half to 3/4 fewer than any of the other larger nations. And what is the ultimate goal of Hyperborea? To establish the Russian race as the true Aryans? Sure, but tangibly retake Moscow? No. Conquer the entirety of Western Europe? Trite. Crossing the English Channel to teach the scheming Rothschilds a lesson? Don't be absurd. Ever heard of the IP conflict? Who has the rightful claim to the land? Who was here first? What religious cradle is this? Put it back, thief. The ultimate goal of Hyperborea is to reclaim the cradle of Aryans and the Hyperborean superculture. Palestine. Unfortunately, the reunification of Russia is where Hyperborea's storyline ends, so Palestine will remain in the hands of the Likud for the foreseeable future. All in all, Hyperborea doesn't have a whole lot of content. I do appreciate the entire world shaking in its boots at our great awakening and noticing, but I do wish that I could at least reclaim Moscow and carve a path to the Levant. As far as I understand, that could maybe be done in the offshoot Requiem mod. not. So maybe one day with a slightly more salient Russia unifier, that could be cinema. But for now, the more heterodox the playthrough, the better. Anyway, I can't wait for my next wholesome chunkers saving Russia Utopia run. But first, re-uploading my War Funnies video that got jannied off of YouTube by a Serbian moderator. I'm going to re-edit and take the blessed opportunity to add an entirely new Clausewitz segment. So if you were one of the 100 faithful who already watched, give it another spin. I promise it will be worth it. The video will be up Friday in 3 weeks, since I'll be heading to South Germany to culturally enrich the local populace. Like, comment for the algo, subscribe for more cromulent videos to come, and watch my other stuff like this video on how to ruin your life with HOI4. Thanks for watching and stay frosty.